Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our presentation of your MTRS benefits. I do have a couple of housekeeping rules to go over. You can, at any time during the presentation today, log into the Q&A panel. There should be a button somewhere on your screen that has a little question mark in it, and that'll open the Q&A panel where you can type questions, and we have a team of people ready to answer those questions. I would ask just a couple of quick things. We cannot answer any personal account information, so please do not enter any personally identifiable information such as socials or MTRS numbers into the chat. We'll be working hard to get through all of the chat questions, either individually or addressed to the whole audience. So I would ask you to please refrain from asking the same question multiple times. We are seeing them all and we're working on them all as they come in. So we would appreciate your patience with that. If for some reason we do not get to your question today or your question is too complex to be handled over chat, you can always call us or visit our website and submit a query through the website. So it is my pleasure to introduce today our presenters, Jennifer Prococo, who is the Senior Benefit Supervisor from the Member Services South Unit, and Jennifer Samalowicz, who is the Senior Retirement Specialist from Member Services West. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Prococo.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Scott. Welcome to the seminar. We hope you're having a great school vacation week. So far, the weather has been absolutely amazing. I think that's been so refreshing for all of us. So thank you for taking time to join us here today. We are here today to talk about your MTRS benefits. So let's get right into it. I do just want to mention that this seminar is in conjunction with our Your MTRS Benefits booklet. You can find that right on our homepage. If you go to mass.gov/MTRS, you should see it right there. It's a PDF. You can download it if you'd like to follow along in that as well. So going into a quick overview here, we are just going to talk about what I'm going to be talking about today. So the first part here, we're just going to do a quick introduction of our system, what we do, and different resources that we provide for our members. Then we're going to get into your membership, talk about your annuity savings account a little bit. And then we're going to get into part 3, where I'm going to be talking about your benefits, different eligibility criteria, as well as your creditable service. Then we will get into part 4, which we will go over the 3 different retirement options. We're going to go over the retirement calculation formula and do a few different sample calculations. And last but not least, we have part 5, and there's some very important retirement issues in here and different things that you're going to need to consider both before and after you retire. So here at the MTRS, we had pension reform back in April of 2012, and because of that now, there are 2 different tiers in our system. So if you started before April 2nd, 2012, you are a Tier 1 member. If you started on or after April 2nd, 2012, you are a Tier 2 member. And I just want to make a note here that later on in this program, we are going to get into some different calculation examples, and they are geared towards our Tier 1 members and not our Tier 2 members. So what are we? What is the Massachusetts Teachers Retirement System? Well, we are your retirement plan. We were formed under Mass General Law, Chapter 32, and we operate as a defined benefit plan under Section 401A of the Internal Revenue Code. Your benefit is based on your age, service, and salary, and the great thing about it is that it's guaranteed for life. It will never decrease and may only increase with future cost of living adjustments. We're governed by our 7-member board. Our board is unpaid, and we have 2 offices. We have one in Charlestown, we have a smaller one out in Springfield, and between the 2 offices, we have about 100 staff members. Our membership is made up of Massachusetts public, elementary, secondary, charter, and collaborative school teachers, as well as administrators. And all eligible employees are required to enroll with the Massachusetts Teachers Retirement System and make mandatory retirement contributions. There are 104 different retirement systems here in the Commonwealth, and we are the largest. So we have, between our active and inactive members, as well as our retirees and survivors, a total membership of 209,554 members. So what do we do for you? So when you join, you're going to establish your MTRS annuity savings account, and throughout your career, we're going to maintain that account for you. If you have any service purchases, we can process them for you. And we're also going to keep you informed about different retirement issues via seminars such as this one today, as well as broadcast emails. Now, if you leave active service before retirement, we can process a refund for you upon your request, or in the unfortunate event that you should pass away, we can process a benefit to your survivor. During your retirement, of course, we are the ones responsible to pay you that monthly retirement allowance. And again, should you pass away, we would be the ones that would calculate a benefit for your survivor if applicable. We have different resources for our members, and most of them can be found right on our website, mass.gov/MTRS. Right on our homepage, you'll see a button for forms, and there you will find different forms for both our active and inactive members. We have service purchase applications. I'll be going through those shortly with you. You will find the beneficiary designation form, as well as the retirement and refund applications. Also on our website, we have a really great retirement benefit estimator. I recommend everyone take a look at this. You simply throw in how many years you think you have on file with the MTRS. You can put in your age, estimate a salary average, and run different retirement calculations for yourself. I always recommend this. I think it's a great tool that we offer. And on our website, we're always going to have information on plan benefits. We will post any pending legislation, regulations, and any links that you might find useful. And when you're on our homepage, if you scroll down to the bottom, you can join our email list and you can receive periodic updates from the MTRS.
Okay, we're going to take a couple of quick questions from the chat. The first one, I will address this myself. The question is, will this recording be available after the seminar? And yes, I did answer this in the chat already, but we will have a recording of this program available on the website by the end of this week. Once it's available, we will email every registered attendee so that you are aware that it's available. And I also put into the chat a link to the PDF of the program book that will. And a question for Jen from the audience. I am now in my second year working in the school system. However, I carried over 14 years from a different retirement system. Am I considered a member now for 16 years or just 2?
Okay, so if you were a member in another Massachusetts public retirement system, when you came over to the MTRS, you would have enrolled, and that would have let us know that you had funds on account in another retirement system. So if it hasn't happened yet, it should be, if they're still on account, transferred over to the MTRS.
Great, thank you very much. That's one more. When you transfer from one district to another and work the full work year, MTRS deducts a number of months from the salary year. How do you recover those months?
Can you read that one more time?
Sure, yeah. When you transfer from one district to another and work the full year.
Okay.
MTRS deducts a number of months from the salary year. How do you recover those months?
I'm not really sure how to answer this question. The only thing I can think of would be if you're looking online at your MSS account and you're not seeing all of your credit there yet. If you were in 2 different districts, sometimes one school district releases their contributions to the MTRS before another. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but it might just be your account's not caught up yet.
Hey,
Hopefully that helps.
That's all the questions we're going to take for right now.
Thank you. All right, so once you become a member of the MTRS, you will contribute a percentage of your earnings, and that percentage is going to vary on when you establish membership in a Massachusetts public retirement system. So the first two lines here, if you started before January 1st of 1975, you would be contributing a flat 7%, a flat 5%, excuse me, of your salary. Between January 1st, 1975 through December 31st, 1978, you would be contributing a flat 7% of your salary. Now, the next three lines, I'm just going to group together because you're going to see, depending on your start date, you're going to be contributing a flat 7, 8, or 9% of your earnings, plus an additional 2% on your earnings over $30,000. So to give you an example, if you started in September of 1992 and you had a salary that year of $40,000, you can see based off of this slide that you would fall in the 8 plus 2% on your earnings over $30,000 line right there. So if your salary was $40,000, the MTRS is going to take a flat 8% on the entire $40,000 and just 2% on your earnings over $30,000, or in this example, that would be $10,000. Moving down to the line for July 1st of 2001, you will see that is when the rate changes to a flat 11%. We call this rate Retirement Plus, and there are a few different ways that you can contribute to the MTRS at 11%. The first would be if you had funds on account before January 1st of 2001, you would have received what we call a Retirement Plus election in the mail. So back then in 2001, you would have received that election and you would have had the opportunity to say yes or no. And if you said yes, you elected to raise your rate up from the 5, 7, 8, or 9 to that flat 11%. Now that is an enhanced benefit. That is why that is the reason why somebody would elect into it. So that is the first reason, the first way. The next way would be if you became a member of the MTRS on or after July 1st of 2001, you are mandated to participate in Retirement Plus, and your contribution rate just simply is that flat 11%. Our Tier 2 members are also mandated to participate in Retirement Plus. Their rate is also a flat 11%. One small perk that we do offer them, though, is once they have been a member for 30 years, their contribution rate is reduced by 3%, and they would be paying a flat 8% at that point. Two important notes that I like to make on this slide. Whenever you see that little hand with the finger in the bow tie there, I just like to make a couple of reminders for people. The first would be on this slide. Now that you're getting a good look at the different contribution rates, just check your pay stub when you have a moment, go online and make sure that you're paying the MTRS the right contribution rate. There's many different reasons why somebody could be paying the wrong rate. It happens. So it's always a good idea to just check and make sure you are contributing at the right rate. And the next important reminder that I like to make on this slide is a lot of people look at that line from 7/1/96 to 6/30/2001. They see 9 plus 2. They're looking on their pay stub. They're seeing a line that says 9%, and they're seeing another line that says 2, and they're thinking 9 plus 2 equals 11. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't, because it's just 9% on your total earnings and 2% on just your earnings over $30,000. So a lot of people do see that and they just think 9 plus 2 equals 11. I'm in Retirement Plus, and they're unfortunately not. So I always just like to point that out on this slide because it can get a little confusing. All right, so we talked about what your retirement contribution rate is, but now we're going to get into what you make a retirement contribution on. So everything on the left-hand side is included. We would want to receive a retirement deduction on these items, and everything on the right-hand side of the slide is excluded, meaning we wouldn't want to receive a retirement deduction on these items. And why that's so important is anything that's included, anything that we can take a retirement deduction on, can be used in the calculation of your final salary average. So it's very important to know, for you what's included and what's excluded, because that's going to help you determine, in the future what your final salary average is. So moving to the left-hand side here, annual base salary per collective bargaining agreement or your individual contract. So if you're a teacher, this is usually found right in your contract under a step and scale. Of course, if you're on an individual contract, it should be noted somewhere in there. Moving down to longevity, this is tied to your length of service with the district. It's always eligible. Again, it does need to be in your contract. Athletic coaching is always pensionable. It's actually written directly into Chapter 32. So as long as you are directly instructing the sport, football coach, soccer coach, field hockey coach, as long as you are directly instructing that sport, it is pensionable. It does not necessarily have to be in your contract. And the last bullet here on the left-hand side is annual payments for additional services pursuant to your collective bargaining agreement. These are your stipends. So mentor, chess club, drama club, any of those items are pensionable as long as that stipend and the amount to be paid for it are listed in your collective bargaining agreement. So that is everything that is pensionable. And moving over to the right-hand side of the screen, we're going to talk about items that are excluded. We don't want to receive a retirement deduction on these items. We cannot use them in the calculation of your final salary average. So the first one here is amounts paid due to employers' knowledge of retirement. This would be, of course, your retirement incentive. And we hear from our members that a lot of districts are offering these to their employees, and we think that's great. Unfortunately, that money is not pensionable. The next two bullets here, I always just lump them together. We have sick leave buyback and unused vacation time. Again, of course, if that's something that your district offers, you can definitely accept those monies. They're just not going to be pensionable. Hourly payments are always excluded with the exception of athletic coaching because that is written directly into Chapter 32. And the only other exception to hourly payments would be breakfast and lunch duty. If you are physically in the space with the students while they're eating, that would also be pensionable. It's also written directly into the law. Next bullet point down here is temporary salary augmentations. This is just a fancy way of saying a bonus. Similar to the retirement incentive, of course, that's something you can accept, but we're not going to be able to use that in the calculation of your salary average. We would not want to receive a retirement deduction on any bonuses. And last but not least, something we don't really see that much of anymore, it's been pretty much phased out through pension reform, would be any annuities and fringe benefits. They are also excluded.
All right, thank you, Jen. We're going to take a few questions. Let's start with this one. If we request opt-in, are there any instances where your retirement benefits would not be calculated by averaging your salary? Is there a penalty for part-time or salary last few years?
Okay, so it's always your highest 3 consecutive years if you are a Tier 1 member. However, I will get into what happens a little bit later on if you are working part-time. We actually can use your full-time salary in the calculation of that benefit. So I would say I'm going to answer that shortly. I do believe if you have the booklet open, it's on page 34, but I will hopefully address that in a little bit in this presentation.
Great, next question. If you leave active service, then you leave your contributions in and draw on your pension a few years later?
Yes. So as long as you are eligible, meaning you have at least 10 years, and say you're younger than 55 as a Tier 1 member, you would be able to just wait and delay your benefit till your 55th birthday.
All right, the next question. If I didn't enroll in Retirement Plus when I had the opportunity, can I switch over now?
So the election was a one-time event that happened in 2001. So unfortunately, I don't believe you'd be able to just enroll now. If you do think there's a discrepancy or that you should have been able to be in Retirement Plus, you can definitely write us and we can review that for you. But unfortunately, it was just a one-time election.
One more?
Sure.
Okay. I worked for 3 years in another district, but took my lump sum benefit. I am now in my 13th year in another district. Will my 3 previous years count towards my retirement?
Okay, lump sum benefit, I'm assuming that means a refund? If you took a refund, if I'm thinking of this the right way, it's not going to count unless you buy it back through a refund buyback, which I will also be getting into shortly in this program. Hopefully that's the question.
Okay. One more?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, one last question on this break. I have noticed that not all of my employment is in MTRS. Who is the best person to contact, email or phone to help resolve this?
Okay, so right now what happens is when you get paid, your retirement contribution through your payroll is sent to the MTRS, but it takes a few different validation processes before it actually gets released into your account. There is a delay on that right now. However, we are working on it, and I would say just keep checking your account if you're on there. We're slowly getting through those. Rest assured that we do have your money. It's in here at the MTRS. It just hasn't been released yet because it does have to go through some certain validations before it can actually be released into your account. So I would say in the meantime, just check every couple of weeks and see if it's been released yet. If not, you can always just give us a call and we can take a look at it for you. Okay, we're going to be moving into part 3. So getting into part 3, I'm going to just go over the different benefit types that we have to offer you here at the MTRS. So the first would be if you leave service before retirement, you can leave your funds on account as we talked about, or you can take a refund. Also, of course, we offer a regular superannuation retirement, and we also offer disability and termination retirements. I will be getting into those in a couple of slides from now. We also have an in-service death benefit in the unfortunate event that you should pass away while you are an active teacher. We do process a benefit to your survivors. All right, so taking a refund. So if you resign voluntarily and you have less than 10 years of service, you're going to receive interest at the rate of 3% on your accumulated total deductions, compounded annually. Now, if you have 10 or more years of service, you're going to receive interest at the regular rate. The regular rate does fluctuate, but it has been 0.1% for the past several years. If you happen to be involuntarily terminated, you're also going to receive interest at the regular rate. And in all cases, you may receive interest for only 2 years after your separation of service. So this gentleman here on the left-hand side, he's warning you, he's saying stop, because we want you to be aware of what taking a refund means. Now, I did mention this program is geared more towards our Tier 1 members. So if you take a refund and later return to membership here at MTRS, you're going to be considered a new member. And as a new member, you are going to fall under our Tier 2 category. Tier 2, unfortunately, does provide lower benefits than Tier 1. The first would be when we go to calculate your benefit. My colleague Jen's going to go over that calculation with you in a little bit, but basically we use a factor that's assigned to your age to calculate your benefit, and those age factors are lower for our Tier 1 or Tier 2 members, meaning you're going to have to work longer to get a similar benefit that you would have as a Tier 1 member. Right now for our Tier 1 members, when we calculate your salary average, it's a salary average of your highest 3 consecutive years. As a Tier 2 member, that goes up to your highest 5 consecutive years. And the last big difference between the 2 tiers is that the minimum retirement age jumps from age 55 to 60. So as a Tier 2 member, you're not even eligible to retire until you're at least 60 years old. All right, so as a Tier 1 member, we have two different retirement plans that you can retire from. The first would be a regular retirement, and with that, you can retire at 20 years with any age, at any age, 20 years at any age, or you'd have to just be at least age 55 and have at least 10 years of service. Now, we also offer Retirement Plus. As I mentioned, this is an enhanced benefit. This is for participating members, and they are the ones that are contributing, as I mentioned, at that flat 11%. And there are requirements in order to be eligible for this enhanced benefit. You can be any age, but you do have to have at least 30 years of creditable service, and 20 of those 30 years have to be membership with either the MTRS or the Boston Retirement Board as a teacher. Once you meet those requirements, the enhanced benefit starts. So at 30 years, we take your age and your years of service, multiply that to get your base percentage. Once you have 30 years, an additional 12% is added onto that base percentage. Every year after that, every full year after that, an additional 2% is added on. So for example, when you have 30 years, an additional 12% is added on, 31 years, an additional 14% is added on, and so forth. And that will continue all the way up until our max benefit of 80%. All right, so as I mentioned, the MTRS does offer disability retirements. We have two different types. The first here would be the ordinary disability retirement, and there is a service requirement of at least 10 years. And the benefit formula is the same as our regular superannuation formula, but if you are a non-veteran, it's going to bump your age factor up to the age of 55. That is what the benefit does. It just simply brings you up to age 55 if you're younger than that. Now, if you are a veteran, that formula is different. It's going to be 50% of your last annual salary plus an annuity portion. We also offer an accidental disability retirement, and there's no service or age requirements for this. The disability must be due to injury sustained while performing job duties. And the way that the benefit is calculated is at 72% of your last annual salary plus another annuity portion. And this benefit, it maxes itself out at 75%. And what's important to know for both of these disability retirements is that they do need to be approved by our legal department. They have to go to a medical panel, and long story short, they can take a long time to process. So one important thing to note here is that if you find yourself in this circumstance, you're always able to file for a regular superannuation retirement and retire under that normal benefit while this is under review. Once it's processed, we can always retroactively adjust your benefit over to this disability retirement benefit. The MTRS does also offer a termination retirement. It's important to note here that this was eliminated for our Tier 2 members, so it's only available to Tier 1 members. There is a service requirement of at least 20 years, and the termination needed to be completely involuntary. So for example, as the slide states, a reduction in force or failure of reappointment, it cannot be due to moral turpitude, meaning you cannot be fired for cause and applied for this benefit. The formula here is a 3-year salary average times multiplied by 1/3 plus an annuity factor, and that's going to give you option A. So this benefit, it's processed under our regular retirement application, but it also requires a statement of release form. And from there, a manager is going to contact the school and get some additional information. It will need to be approved by our board, and the benefit usually comes out to somewhere in the high 40% range. All right.
Ready for some questions?
Yes.
Just going to move a little closer. People online couldn't hear me.
Oh, okay.
First question is, what about summer school? Does that count in the salary or is it excluded?
All right. So long story short is no, summer school is not pensionable. The only exception to this would be if you were on a 12-month contract, if you had a position that was year-round, or if your position if your primary position was tied to whatever you're doing in the summer, so sometimes we have like guidance counselors that have to work some additional days in the summer. So I don't want to say it's always excluded, but most of the time, if you're just going to work like a summer program, for example, my kids, I pay to have them go to a public summer school program. I know that's not pensionable. It's just a separate thing that some teachers are doing over the summer.
If somebody was a member from 2000 to 2003, left service and received a refund, then returned to service in 2013, would they be considered Tier 1 or Tier 2?
Tier 2, because if you remember going back a couple of slides, once you take that refund, you've severed your membership, and upon returning, you're considered a brand new member. So if you came back to service in 2013, you would be considered a Tier 2 member, as that's after April 2nd, 2012. However, you can apply to buy back the refund that you took and add those years onto your benefit, but your benefit will be calculated under the Tier 2 calculation.
Do you have to work for 30 years to calculate your pension for Retirement Plus?
To get the Retirement Plus enhanced benefit, you do have to work at least 30 years, and 20 of them have to be with the MTRS or Boston as a teacher.
How does an FMLA leave affect retirement years of service time?
FMLA leave. Well, I'm going to get into some different leaves on a slide shortly, but if you're just being paid, you're going to receive the service credit. I'm going to get into some different leave situations on the next slide.
One last. Before I got a full-time job, I did a lot of subbing in a different district. Can that be eligible towards retirement? And what kind of proof would I need to submit to the MTRS?
Absolutely. I'm going to get into the different types of service purchases that you can apply to buyback on another slide very soon. But absolutely, if you were a day-to-day sub or a long-term sub in another district here in Massachusetts at a public school, I'll get into how you can get that documented shortly.
Great, thanks.
All right, so on this slide here, I'm going to be talking about service that you make an MTRS retirement contribution on. So we typically see a combination. Some members are 10-month employees, some members are 12-month employees. Now, teachers are typically 10-month, they're on a 10-month contract. Their school year usually starts the end of August, early September, runs through June. Typically, you're working about 100, 181, 182 2 days in a school year. That is what we consider, or what we call, a 10-month contract. Now, a 12-month contract, a lot of our administrators fall under this. They're usually working July to June. Their contract is usually about 260 days. And what's important to note here is that whether you're on a 10 or 12-month contract, in order to receive a full year of service credit, you just have to be paid for all of the days in your required work year. So as long as you work and are paid for your whole year, so if you're a teacher and your salary is $80,000, if you're paid that full $80,000, you're going to get a full year of service credit for working September to June. Now, for a leave of absence, if you were on a fully paid leave, you're going to receive full service credit. So hopefully this will help answer that FMLA question I just had. If the leave was fully paid, you're going to receive full service credit. We won't even know. We're just going to receive that retirement deduction, and we won't know that you took a sick day or a vacation day or whatever day that you weren't there for. Now, if you are on a paid leave, like a partially paid leave or a sabbatical, if the school is giving you prorated pay, you're going to get prorated service credit. So for example, if you take a 75% paid leave or a sabbatical for a full year, you're going to get prorated pay. You're also going to get prorated credit. So if you were on a 75% leave, you are going to get 0.75 years of credit with the MTRS. Now, if you were ever on an unpaid leave, you can receive up to 1 month of service credit for that unpaid leave. So if your leave was less than a month, you're just going to receive credit for the number of days that your leave occurred for. So for example, you're out for 10 days unpaid, you'll be able to get credit for those 10 days. Now, if you went on a leave of absence from, say, February through the end of the school year, the MTRS has the ability to give you up to 1 month or 0.1 years for that leave. The last important thing to note here on this slide is that full years and full months are what's used in the calculation of your benefits. So at the end of your career, you're ready to retire, and you have, say, 30.1234 years. When we go to calculate your benefit, we're going to be using 30.1 years. So full years and full months will be counted towards the calculation of your benefit. Okay, now on this slide, we're going to be talking about part-time MTRS membership service. And what I mean by when I say membership service is I'm talking about the service that you paid the MTRS a retirement contribution on. So the rules on this slide, I know it doesn't look like there's too much information on this slide, but it's a pretty important slide because it's only applying to MTRS membership service. So just to go back to remind you, in order to become eligible for the MTRS, you needed to be certified, your position needed to require certification, you needed to be working under a contract and working 50% or greater. So membership service before November 9th of 1990, if you were part-time, you're going to receive full service credit. So just to clarify, part-time means 50% or greater all the way up to 99%. So for example, if before November 9th of 1990, you were a member, you were contributing, say you were working 3 days a week out of 5, you'd be considered 60%, excuse me. We are going to be able to credit you with a full year for that time period. Now this next line here is a little confusing. So if you were always part-time between November 9th of 1990 and July 9th of 2010, and what I mean by that is you never had a status change, you never went to full-time, you're going to receive full credit. So it doesn't matter the percentage of part-time. For example, you could be 50% 1 year, 70% the next. That can fluctuate, that's fine. But if you ever went to full-time, even for a couple of months covering a coworker's maternity leave or something like that, now all of your part-time service between those 2 dates will now be prorated. The next section here, so on or after July 9th of 2010, any part-time service, membership service after July 9th of 2010 is always prorated. But the good thing here, and I think this was a question a few slides back, is that if you happen to retire while you're working part-time, the MTRS cannot prorate you twice. So if you happen to retire and you're a part-time teacher, we're actually going to use your full-time salary in the calculation of your benefit. And as I mentioned before, page 34 of the booklet has some pretty good examples of this. And the last important thing that I like to mention on this slide would be kindergarten and pre-K membership. So for our kindergarten and pre-K teachers that were members before July 9th of 2010, they're always going to receive full-time credit regardless of any status changes. So for example, you could have been a 50% kindergarten teacher 1 year, and the next year you went to full day kindergarten teacher. So even though you technically had a status change, it's okay because you were a kindergarten teacher. And if you were a kindergarten teacher or a pre-K teacher before July 9th of 2010, we can give you full credit for the years that you were part-time regardless of any status change. Okay, so now we're going to get into purchasable service. So the top section here, you'll see that it's billed at the actuarial interest rate. That rate does fluctuate. It's currently 7%. And the bottom half of the slide here, you're going to see that it's billed at buyback rate, which is always half the actuarial, and it's currently 3.5%. And it's important to go through these because your years of service is a crucial factor in the calculation of your benefit. So if you have any of these available to you, it would be worth looking into. First one here is a refund buyback. That's pretty self-explanatory. If you took a refund of your contributions from either the MTRS or one of the other Massachusetts public retirement systems, you can request to buy those back. The next one here is Massachusetts state or municipal employment. We call this other Massachusetts service. And a good example of this would be a lifeguard at a local pool, a clerk at a Massachusetts city or town, or maybe a professor at a state college. That would go on this form here. Next one down is our Massachusetts substitute or temporary teaching. This is our most popular service purchase, given that a lot of our members do have some subbing throughout their career. Maybe before they were a teacher, they were day-to-day subbing, or maybe you had some long-term subbing before you became eligible for the MTRS, or maybe you were just a teacher working less than 50%. All of these would be documented on this form here. Next one down, we have out-of-state public school teaching. So if you were a public school teacher in another state, you could request to buy back the service here in Massachusetts. You do need to meet the same eligibility criteria that we have here at the MTRS, meaning that you had to be working at least 50% and in a position that required certification. And out of all of the applications that I'm talking about, this is the only one that has 3 parts. Most only have 2. There's a part that you fill out, that's part 1, and part 2 would go back to your former employer. But here with the out-of-state public school teaching, we actually have a 3rd part, and that's where, in addition to your former employer, we ask that you go back to your former public retirement system because you cannot be due a benefit in that state and still purchase it here in Massachusetts. The last one here up top is Department of Defense Overseas Dependent School Teaching. And along with the application, you do need to submit your federal transcript that verifies this service. Moving down to the bottom section here, what's billed at buyback rate. The first one here is military service. You can purchase up to 4 years. Along with the application, you do need to submit a copy of your DD-214. And in order to buy this service, you do need to meet the Mass General Law definition of a veteran. Next one down here is non-public school teaching in a Massachusetts publicly funded school. So this particular purchase is quite lengthy. It has a lot of requirements needed to determine eligibility. The main one being that you do need to have been engaged in teaching pupils. And I think this is a good point to stop and just say, you know, if you think you have any non-public school teaching service or any of these applications here, I always recommend to get that ball rolling and get your service documented because it can take a really long time to process some of these things. And even if you send it in, you're under no obligation to ever purchase any time back. It's just a good idea to at least get it documented so that you have it in case you might need a little extra time to get you to the next year or something. I just always recommend at least getting that ball rolling because these can take some time to process. But moving down to vocational education, so here this is where if you ever taught a trade in a Chapter 74 approved program, you can buy back up to 3 years of the experience that you used to get your vocational license from the Department of Ed. The last bullet here is Peace Corps service. So similar to vocational, you can purchase a maximum of up to 3 years, and you do need to submit certification that you participated with the Peace Corps along with the form. So that is all the different types of service purchases that we have. And now I'm going to get into how you can purchase the service. Well, right on our website, mass.gov/MTRS, under forms for active and inactive members, you will find all of the forms for the applications that I just mentioned. And there is, as I mentioned, a part 1 for you to fill out, and then a part 2 and possibly 3 for your former employer to fill out. The forms are they're interactive PDFs, meaning that you can fill out your name, address, member number, any of those things, and then email it or send it over to your former employer's payroll to have them document the rest of the information that we need to determine if the service is eligible, and if it is eligible, what we need to determine the credit and cost associated with the purchase. So the way that we calculate the cost for most of these service purchases is that we take your earnings in a calendar year that your former employer provides to us, and we multiply them by what your applicable MTRS contribution rate would have been. So if you remember going back to that slide, it was 5, 7, 8, 9, 11. We would figure out what that amount was, and that's going to give us your principal. And from there, interest is added on at either the actuarial or buyback rate all the way until the service is paid for in full. Most of the applications are calculated that way. A couple, vocational and military, do have different calculations, and they're actually right on the form itself, so you can take a look at those there. And if we have enough information to determine that the service is eligible, we're going to send you an invoice. Now you can pay by personal check. We offer a 5-year installment plan. You can also pay with a rollover from an eligible plan. We do have rollover forms available to you right on our website. And later on, we're going to get into how we track both your pre-tax and after-tax payments. And we do have some important reminders here. So the first one would be is you need to be active at the time that you apply for any of the service purchases I just mentioned. The only exception to those would be Peace Corps and refund buybacks. Every other one, you need to be actively contributing to the MTRS when you apply. All service purchases do need to be paid in full before your date of retirement, and that is because, moving down to the last bullet here, late payments will postpone your retirement date, and they could also just delay that first check. So, you know, we don't want that to happen. If you do happen to get on one of our 5-year installment plans and later on decide that, you know, you want to retire, you're definitely going to want to call us and ask for a buyout cost so that it doesn't interfere with your retirement date. All right, so that is it for me. Thank you for your attention. I'm going to be handing this over to my colleague, Jennifer Samolovich, for the second half, and I hope you all have a terrific rest of your vacation week. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jen. As Jen mentioned, I am Jen Samolovich. I'm going to be taking over the second half of this presentation today, and essentially what we're going to be going through is your retirement information. So we're going to touch base on the different benefit options that are available to our retirees. Then we'll get into the retirement calculations, and then lastly, we'll touch base on information that we think will be helpful for before and after you retire. We're going to get right into the retirement information here. On the screen, you're going to see that there's building blocks, options A, B, and C. Essentially, what your benefit options is this is at the time of retirement, how the MTRS determines how we're going to calculate the benefit that will be paid out to you as a retiree, and then how we will pay out a survivor benefit to your beneficiaries, if applicable, at the time of your passing. Essentially, on the retirement application, there's a separate page that is designated for you to indicate which retirement option you are going to select to move forward with the retirement process. This is a personal choice to you. Whatever is your situation at the time of retirement will have an impact on what you choose for your benefit option. So we're going to go over here some of the different pros and cons of each option, and then we will walk through some examples with some real figures so that you can see the impact that this will have in a real life situation or a simulated situation. So the first option we have here is your maximum benefit of 80%. This is your maximum benefit. This is not your maximum benefit of 80%. This is your maximum allowance that you're eligible to receive under that set formula that Jen has mentioned, and we're going to break down in a couple of slides. So what this is it's based off of your age and your years of service at the time of retirement, which gives you your maximum allowance that you're eligible to receive. So option A as a retiree will give you the largest amount that you can possibly receive as an MTRS retiree. And then upon your passing, there will be no benefit left to your survivor. Option B is approximately 1 to 3% less than your maximum benefit of option A. And then this kind of works similarly to a short-term life insurance policy. So with option B, yes, you're receiving 1 to 3% less than your option A amount. And then upon your passing, there will be a one-time lump sum payment paid out to your survivor if of whatever is left in your annuity savings account upon your passing. And now I say whatever's left in your annuity savings account because over time, your annuity savings account will deplete. This is because it's funding a portion of your benefit that's going to get paid out to you every month as a retiree. 20% of your benefit is going to be paid out of the funds that are in your annuity savings account. 80% will be used from the funds within the state pension fund. Now, over time, there's an annuity spend down period. And essentially what that is, in about 9 to 11 years, your annuity savings account will slowly deplete because it's funding a portion of your benefit. Now, those 9 to 11 year time frame is if you pass away outside of that 9 to 11 year window, then upon your passing, it's likely that there will be no funds left in your annuity savings account and therefore no benefit left to your survivor. With both options A and B, there is a mid-month payment that would be made to your survivors. It's not a benefit per se, but you are able to receive your benefit for that portion of the month that you were living. So for example, if you were to pass away, unfortunately, on the 10th of a month, you as an MTRS retiree are still eligible to have been receiving your pension for that portion of the month that you were living. So your survivor would receive that portion of the month that you were living. So from the 1st to the 10th, that portion of the allowance will be paid out to that survivor. And our last option is option C. Option C is approximately 9 to 11% less than your maximum benefit of option A. And then upon your passing, you can choose one beneficiary, which can either be a parent, child, sibling, spouse, or an ex-spouse not yet remarried, to receive a lifetime benefit of 2/3 of what you're receiving for the rest of their life. A couple things to keep in mind with your option C selection. Your age and your beneficiary's age has a direct impact on the reduction that you will receive from that option A allowance. So generally, we see it closer to the 9 to 11% of a reduction. However, that would be typically for somebody who's retiring with somebody closer in age to them as their surviving beneficiary for option C. If you're choosing someone much younger than you, for example, somebody who's, let's say, 28 or even lower, a child, for example, the MTRS there will be a greater reduction in the option C amount that you will receive as a retiree, because we have to have the expectancy that we will then have to pay out that option C survivor benefit for a much longer time period for somebody who is much younger than you. In the event that your option C beneficiary was to predecease you, you would pop up, as a way of saying it, to the option A benefit. Unfortunately, because option C, the way we calculate your benefit as a retiree for option C has a direct relationship as far as your age and your beneficiary's age at the time of retirement, we don't have the ability to recalculate a benefit with a new option C beneficiary. So you would automatically go up to receive that maximum benefit under the option A calculation. As Jen mentioned, your benefit payment is going to be calculated based off of a set formula. The formula is your age at the time of retirement times your years of service. Your age at the time of retirement is going to be assigned an age factor. Essentially, there's an age factor for every age up until age 65. So at age 65, your age factor will max out at 0.025 as an age factor. We multiply this age factor by your years of creditable service. When we calculate your benefit, we're going to use full years and full months in the calculation of your creditable service. So if you have 32.7385 years of service, we will use 32.7 years in the calculation of your percentage. When we multiply these two factors together, this is going to give us your base percentage of your salary average. If you are participating in Retirement Plus, as Jen mentioned, you either elected in 2001 or you were mandated in 2001, and you are meeting that eligibility as far as 30 full years of creditable service, 20 of which are membership service with MTRS or Boston Teaching Service, then we would add on that additional Retirement Plus enhancement to your base percentage. This will leave us with your total percentage of your salary average. Again, this salary average is going to be capped out at a maximum benefit payment due to our members at an 80% maximum benefit. We then take whatever your salary average, whatever your percentage of your salary average comes to, and we're going to multiply that by your salary average. As Jen mentioned, this is going to be your 3 highest consecutive salaries that will be used in the calculation of your retirement benefit. Generally, this is going to be your last 3 years of service. The typical fashion for members is that they start and then your salary will continue to increase with you as your years of service increase. However, if you have a one-off or a different type of situation, let's say you were an administrator a couple of years before you went to retire, so you were an administrator, and then for your last couple of years you decided to go back to teaching, then we do have the ability, if your administrator years are higher than your last 3 years, then we would use those 3 years in the calculation of your salary average. So it's your 3 highest consecutive years of salary, regardless of where they fall in your service. This would leave us with your option A annual benefit amount. If you're a veteran, if you qualify under Mass General Law for a veteran status, then we do have the ability to add on an additional veterans benefit of up to $300. Which, if you're a veteran, then would leave us with your total option A allowance. As a retiree, you're going to get paid at the end of every month for that month that you've been retired for, which might be a little bit different than what you are currently receiving. Typically, most of you probably have biweekly checks that come in. So just something to make you aware of so that you can plan. As a retiree, you're going to get paid once a month at the end of that month, the last business day, for the month you've been retired. Okay, so let's get into some examples. This is Mary Educator. She is retiring on June 30th of 2024. She is not participating in Retirement Plus. At the time of retirement, she is going to be age 59, so we use the age factor of 0.019. Mary's service consists of regular teaching service in Pittsfield for 30 years, and then she had bought back some additional time, out-of-state, substitute service, and other Massachusetts public service to bring Mary to a total year of 35 years of service. Mary's salary average is, in her situation, going to be her last 3 years. So Mary's last 3 years salary are her highest 3 years. So we take the average of the 21-22, 22-23, 23-24 salaries, and that comes out to $75,000 for Mary. And she is a veteran. So now we're going to plug her figures into the retirement calculation formula to hopefully have a better understanding of how that formula works. Maybe. There we go. All right. So as you saw in the slide before, in the blue, you'll have all of Mary's specific figures that we're going to plug into the formula. So left-hand side is the formula, right-hand side is Mary's actual figures. So retiring on June 30th of 2024, we're going to take Mary's age factor of 0.019 at age 59 and multiply that by her years of creditable service, which is 35 years. This gives us Mary's base percentage of her salary average of 66.5%. Since Mary's not participating in Retirement Plus, there's no additional enhanced benefit that we would add on here. This will leave us with Mary's total percentage of her salary average of 66.5%. We're going to multiply Mary's 66.5% by her salary average of $75,000, which leaves us with Mary's option A annual benefit of $49,875. Since Mary's a veteran, we have the ability to add on that additional $300 to her option A benefit, which will give us Mary's total option A allowance of a yearly amount of $50,175 a year, which breaks out to $4,181 a month. These figures on the screen are gross figures. That would be on a pre-tax basis, so before federal taxes and any health insurance deductions are taken out. So these are gross figures, and again, it's broken out in a monthly form because you're going to get paid at the end of every month for that month you've been retired. So this $50,175,000 a year, that is Mary's maximum benefit. So that's the maximum amount that Mary can receive, and under option A, she's choosing to receive that maximum benefit, and then upon her passing, there will be no benefit that's left to any survivor. Now, if Mary chose option B in her retirement calculation, so again, all her figures are going to stay the same, but if she selected her option B amount, that would decrease her allowance to $49,707 a year, which is less by $468 annually. In this specific situation, it's closer to, or it's less than a 1% difference. However, we generally do see it trend closer to that 3% reduction for those option B selections. So something to keep in mind, again, for option B, you're going to receive 1 to 3% less than your maximum benefit of option A. And then upon your passing, whatever remains in your annuity savings account will be paid out to your beneficiaries listed. If at the time of your passing, your annuity savings account is depleted, then you will not have any benefit that will be paid out to your survivors. If your annuity savings account depletes prior to you passing, so if you outlive that 9 to 11 time span, then you will receive you will not see any difference in your benefit payment that will be paid out to you. Because at that point, the state will kick in 100% and still continue to fund your benefit payout under this option B selection. And our last benefit option would be if Mary was to retire using option C. So option C, if Mary retired on June 30th of 2024, we would need to determine her option C factor. And this graph you see on the this graph you see on the slide, we do have a bigger one in the back of the booklet as well, which might be helpful to you in the link that Scott had originally sent. In this factor, you'll see on the left-hand side, you're going to see the member's closest age at the time of retirement. And on the top, you're going to see your beneficiary's closest age at the time of retirement. One thing to point out is that this is your closest age at the time of retirement and not your actual age. So if you remember, Mary's actual age was 59 at the time of retirement. However, her closest age at the time of retirement is age 60. So on the left-hand side, we find Mary's age of 60. And on the top, Mary's beneficiary's closest age at the time of retirement is age 59. So we locate those two on the outskirts and then see where they intersect within the graph. They intersect at the option C factor of 0.9099. Now let's plug that into the formula. So where we use that option C factor is we would take Mary's option A annual benefit of $49,875. We're going to multiply that now by the option C factor of 0.9099. This gives us her option C annual benefit of $45,381. We would then add in that veteran's benefit of $300, which will leave us with Mary's option C allowance of $45,681 a year, which breaks out to $3,807 a month. So this is what Mary will receive as a retiree for the rest of her life. Now with option C, Mary had the ability to choose one beneficiary for her survivor. Now upon Mary's passing, her beneficiary will receive 2/3 of that option C allowance that she's receiving for the rest of their life. This survivor allowance breaks out to $30,400 $454 a year, and monthly $2,538 a month. And that survivor will continue to receive that payout amount for the rest of their life. Now again, if Mary's survivor beneficiary was to predecease her, she would pop up to that option A benefit amount. So for Mary Educator's situation, if her beneficiary was to predecease her, her option A amount that she would receive would be that $50,175 annually, which is her option A benefit plus that veterans benefit. So that's what she would then switch to receiving, other than the option C amount in that situation. Here is our next example. So that was Mary with all her different options. Now we're going to look at Tom Teacher only under option A, but the difference between the two is Tom Teacher is participating in Retirement Plus. He's also going to retire on June 30th of 2024. His age at the time of retirement is age 58. So we're going to use the age factor of 0.018 in the calculation of his benefit. For Tom, his total years of creditable service consist of 34.5 years. For this example, we are going to assume that at least 20 of those years are MTRS service or Boston teaching service in order for him to meet the eligibility to receive that Retirement Plus enhanced benefit. His salary average is going to be $75,000, and Tom is also a veteran. Plugging Tom's figures into the formula. Again, the retirement formula is on the left-hand side. Tom's specific numbers are on the right-hand side here. So for Tom Teacher, age 58, we take the age factor of 0.018. We're going to multiply that by his years of service, 34.5 years. This gives us his base percentage of his salary average of 62.1%. Since Tom has 30 or more years and has that eligibility for the Retirement Plus, this is the point where we would add on that enhanced benefit of 20% for 34 full years to his base percentage. Now you might be looking at this and maybe you're getting a little bit concerned. We do know that 62.1 and 20 is more than 80%. Don't worry, we do math for a living. Rest assured that we understand this, and the maximum salary average is still going to be capped out at that 80%, even though Tom is in Retirement Plus. We take this 80% and we're going to multiply it by his salary average of $75,000. This gives us Tom's option A annual benefit of $60,000. Since he is a veteran, we're going to add on that additional $300 veteran benefit for a total option A allowance of $60,300 a year, which breaks out to $5,025 a month for Tom Teacher. And again, this is his maximum benefit that he'll receive upon retirement. If you were to unfortunately pass away while an active member with the MTRS will at that time process a benefit to your survivors in one of the following ways. One way being a one-time lump sum distribution of the funds in your annuity savings account. The other being a monthly member survivor benefit that would get paid out to your survivor. Essentially, this is calculated the same way as a member's option C retirement benefit. There will be no 2/3 reduction applied to this member survivor benefit. If the member to pass away was less than the age of 55, the MTRS has the ability to increase the age factor used in this calculation to age 55. So essentially, when we calculate this member survivor benefit, we're going to take that age factor of age 55 or above, whatever is applicable in the situation, and multiply that by the years of service that the member had at the time of death. And this will leave us the option A amount. We would then use the option C factor to determine what that survivor would receive as a member survivor benefit for the rest of their life. In addition to this survivor benefit, the MTRS will also pay out a dependent children allowance. This is $120 a month to the oldest child, and then $90 a month for each additional child thereafter. These allowances are payable until they're 18, or if they're in school, up until their age 22. This is a good reminder that you always want to keep your beneficiary information up to date. Ultimately, the surviving spouse does have the final say as far as how the benefit is paid out, either the lump sum or the member survivor benefit. But again, I'm sure it's a very difficult time for that surviving spouse. So if you have your beneficiary information up to date, it might make a trying time that much more easy for your spouse. And now we're going to take some questions, I believe.
Okay, first question. If I leave teaching but delay receiving benefits for a number of years, does my age factor reflect the age at which I left teaching or the year I start receiving benefits?
Okay, so thank you. Good question. So your age factor at the time of retirement is going to be your actual age at the time of retirement. So let's say for that situation, you stopped working when you were age 50, but you meet the retirement eligibility of 10 years or 20 years overall, you can delay to receive your benefit. So even though you stopped working at, let's say, age 50, and you then want to retire 5 years later, we're not going to use age 50 in the calculation of your benefit. We will use your actual age that you apply to retire within the calculation of your benefit. So if you're age 55, we would use age 55 in the calculation of your benefit.
Is there a pop-up provision if you elect for option B and your spouse passes away?
Unfortunately, for option B, there is no pop-up provision that would be provided. By taking option B, again, it works similarly to a short-term life insurance policy. So typically we see members selecting that option if they are ill for some reason and know that they might not outlive that 9 to 11 time span, that they want to ensure that a benefit will be paid out to their survivor, but they also want to receive a large benefit as a retiree. So there is no pop-up provision for option B. What happens is upon your what will happen is for option B, if your beneficiary were to predecease you in both options A or B, you can select a new beneficiary at any point for either options A or B. And that can be found on our website, mass.gov/MTRS, under forms for retirees. There is a change of option beneficiary selection. And this is only for options A and B, however, because again, option C has a set, your beneficiary is within the set formula of how your benefit is calculated.
When do you have to choose your benefit option?
You have to choose your benefit option at the time of retirement. So the retirement application is, I think it's 14 or 15 pages long. Don't be daunted by it. The first portion is around 9 pages that you would fill out. Within those 9 pages is 1 page or 2 pages actually specifically designated to the retirement benefit option selection. So on that page, there's going to be a lot of words, but you'll see options A, B, or C, and they are spelled out and there are differences there, as well as some information within the retirement packet. And so in that area is where you would check the box either options A, B, or C, and you would have to sign and date it, and then your spouse would have to acknowledge your selection of that option since it has a direct impact on the benefit that will be paid out to you.
Can my beneficiary be a trust?
Yes, it can. Your beneficiary can be a trust for either options A or B. However, for option C, since there is a date of birth that is needed in order to calculate that benefit, it does have to be either, as I said, a parent, a sibling, a child, a spouse, or an ex-spouse not yet remarried. So options A or B, they can be a trust.
2 more?
Sure.
Okay. For purchasing service, once you get an invoice, can you decide not to buy back?
Absolutely. So you have up until your retirement date to complete any purchases of service. So if you get an invoice and it's either too much or if you don't think you need it, you have the ability to opt out of buying that back. You're not obligated by any means to buy it back. However, what will happen is if you don't buy it back at that time and you later do want to buy it back, you will have to apply for an updated invoice. So there will be an additional wait period for you to receive that buyback. Just something to keep in mind, because if you do get it into us and you're getting closer to the retirement and you do think you might buy it back at a later date, always just apply well in advance prior to your date of retirement.
Okay, last question for now. If I took 5 years off to have a child, is there any way to recoup these years or do a buyback?
Unfortunately, for maternity leave, there is no buyback of ability to buy back your years of service. Essentially, you would receive 1 month of service credit for that period of time. So if you were out of service for 5 years, the service credit that you'll receive for that maternity leave will be 0.1. There's no ability to buy it back, fortunately.
Great, that's it for now.
Okay. Thank you all for those questions. This last portion of the presentation, we're going to get into the retirement information that we think will be helpful to you both before and after your retirement. One thing that the MTRS does not necessarily oversee, but we do have some helpful information that we want to provide to you just to help avoid any surprises that may come after your retirement. We essentially, at the time of retirement, the plan that is provided to you as an active member, there's a chance that it might not continue when you go to retire. So we recommend our members to touch base with their health insurance coordinator about a year prior to your date of retirement to ask them specific questions as far as your coverage. Essentially, your health insurance coordinator will be within your school district or your city or town, and you would want to touch base with them as far as one thing that is very important to know is if you were to pass away and you're the primary holder of your health insurance, what would happen to that health insurance? Typically, it does continue with your family. However, it's just something that you would want to plan ahead of and just to ensure that it will continue with your family upon your passing. Secondly, on a more brighter note, if you were to move out of state, if you're planning to go to Florida, you would want to discuss with that school district in regards to the plans or the coverage for other states that you're planning to travel or move to after retirement. In regards to MTRS role in your health insurance, essentially at the time of retirement, your health insurance coordinator will indicate to the MTRS what to deduct from your retirement check, and then we will deduct that set amount from your pension check. It is going to be deducted on an after-tax basis when you are a retiree. For Medicare, Medicare generally kicks in at age 65. You would qualify for Medicare coverage if you yourself qualify for Social Security, if you are married to somebody who qualifies for Medicare coverage, or if you've been paying that 1.45% Medicare tax for 10 or more years. And you'd be paying this tax if you started teaching after 4/1 of 86, or if you had a change in employer after 4/1/86. We do want to encourage you and stress the fact that you want to touch base with Social Security prior to your 65th birthday to avoid any potential penalty that may be charged to you. Touch base with them in regards to your Medicare eligibility, as well as when you should be applying for your Part B. Part B typically covers your general care and general doctor's visits, things like that. So touch base with Social Security just to avoid the possibility of having to pay any penalty before your 65th birthday. And the last thing you would want to speak with your health insurance coordinator on would be Medigap. Essentially, Medigap is a supplemental plan that will help bridge that gap between what Medicare will not cover. Working after retirement. Typically, Everybody's ideal is that you don't want to work after retirement. But the sad reality of it is that it likely is going to happen, whether it's because you want to or because you have to. So there are no limitations if you return to work in a private sector, in an employment in another state, whether it's private or public, or any employment within a federal government. So there's no limitations as to how much you can work or how much you can earn after retirement if you're employed in one of those different scenarios. However, where you will see limitations is if you have employment within the Massachusetts public sector. Please note that this is not just if a Massachusetts public entity is your employer, it does also include contracted service. So if you are returning to work in a Massachusetts public sector and you are returning to the same school district of which you retired from, then you have to be separated for 60 days in order to be eligible to return back in that position or into that school district. If you're returning to another school district, there is no 60-day limitation or 60-day separation applicable to you. This 60-day separation will be waived if you retire at age 62 or above, or if you're retiring at the maximum benefit of 80%. Typically, this 60-day window, let's say, for example, you're stopping work in June and then you want to return to that same employer in the start of the next school year in September. You're going to meet that 60-day separation window over those summer months. So then you are eligible to return to that same employer starting in September. Now, getting into the limitations as far as your hours and your earnings after retirement in a public sector employment. For your hours, there's going to be a limit on your total hours of 1,200 hours that you can work within a calendar year. So this is from January through December, a maximum hours that you can work of 1,200 hours. For your earnings limitation, we would look at what you would have earned had you had not retired from that position, subtract out what you're receiving as an MTRS benefit, and then that amount that is remaining are your allowable earnings that can be paid out to you for the remainder of that calendar year. After you retire one full calendar year from January to December, you can receive an increase limit of $15,000 on that allowable earnings amount. Please note that the hours in the earnings limitation is not an either-or situation. Oftentimes we see members getting closer to the earnings limitation, but you might not yet be there on your hours limitation. So at that point, you would need to stop working, or you do have the ability to freeze your pension so that you can continue in that position, but you cannot go over those hours or earnings limitations. If you do, you would be subject to pay back to the MTRS those additional earnings on the limits that you've overdone. We're going to break down that working after retirement's earning limitation for you. As in the slide before, it's kind of just a paragraph, and I don't know about you, but I'm a more visual person, and let's break it down with our Mary Educator example. So Mary Educator is retiring on June 30th of 2024. And in her position, when she worked in the 23-24 school year, her position paid her $77,000 a year. So if Mary's returning to work, what she'll have to do is go to her school district that she retired from and ask them, had I had not retired, what would I have earned in the 24-25 school year? Please note that this is not just your base earnings. This earning amount that they should provide you would be base earnings, longevity, stipends, and coaching. So that total amount, it should be what they're going to provide you with. In Mary's situation, it's $79,000. So at that point, once Mary gathers that information, she would subtract out her gross annual MTRS pension amount. In this example, it's $50,175,000 a year. This will leave us with Mary's allowable earnings for the rest of the calendar year of 2024 of $28,825. This is for the remainder of the calendar year. So if Mary is retiring June 30th of 2024 and she wants to return to work in September, the following school district, the 24-25 year, then that means that she has the allowable earnings of $28,825 to earn from September to December. Now, the likelihood that Mary will go over those earnings is very slim, and typically we do see members' ability to return back to work without nearing either the hours or the earnings limitation for that first school year following their retirement. And this is because a school year will be split amongst 2 different calendar years. So if Mary was to return back in the 24-25 school year, her time from September of 2024 through December of 2024 is looked at individually from her time from January 2025 through June of 2025. Where Mary will want to start keeping a closer track on her earnings and hours would be if she was then to work in the 25-26 school year, because we would then combine her hours and earnings from September of 2025 through December of 2025 with her hours and earnings from January to June of the school year prior. So just something to keep in mind when you're calculating out these benefits. That is how it should be looked at. Now, after retiring 1 full calendar year, you do have that additional $15,000 that can be added to your allowable earnings. So for Mary's situation, her full calendar year will be the calendar year of 2025. So starting January 1st of 2026, Mary has the ability to earn an additional $15,000 on her allowable earnings. Please note that this is not cumulative. It is a one-time additional amount that is added to your allowable earnings calculation. If a district is having trouble to fill a position, then they do have the ability to apply to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for a critical shortage waiver. This is nothing that the MTRS gets involved in. However, what will happen is that under a critical shortage position, a retiree has the ability to still earn their full MTRS retirement pension, as well as in addition to the critical shortage salary for that position. Typically, these critical shortage positions are anywhere from 6 months to a year of time, and it does have to be an approved critical shortage waiver. So what will happen is you'd be eligible for this critical shortage position if you've been separated, if it's an employer that you're returning back to, the employer that you retired from. The 60-day separation does still apply to that position, even though there's a critical shortage waiver. However, if you're returning to another employer, that 60-day separation again does not apply. So you'd be eligible to work under this critical shortage waiver, assuming the 60-day of separation is met. And if you are retiring under Retirement Plus, you do have to wait 2 years in order to be eligible to be employed under a critical shortage waiver position. Okay, so the good news is that your pension will not be subject to state taxes. Unfortunately, the bad news is that the government will never let you get away and you will still be subject to federal taxes on your pension. If you have any after-tax money that you paid into the Mass Teachers Retirement System at any point throughout your career, then this money is kept separately within your annuity savings account. Essentially, we don't want you to have to pay taxes on those funds twice, obviously. So your after-tax money would be any earnings that you paid into the Mass Teachers Retirement System prior to 1988, and if you had any service purchases that you paid with after-tax money. So all of that would live within the after-tax area of your annuity savings account. When you retire, you will receive a 1099-R. Essentially, this is the retiree version of a W-2. You will receive this annually, and on that 1099-R, you will see a designated box that indicates after-tax money. Within that box, the amount that's indicated there, you will typically recover those funds in about 20 to 30 years. Every other year, when you receive your 1099-R, you will receive a benefit verification form along with that 1099-R. Essentially, this is just an alive and well check to make sure you are still with us and you are still the one receiving your pension check to avoid any potential fraud. Lastly, if you're moving out of state, you would want to check with that state to see if your Massachusetts state pension would be taxed. And before I move on, I do just want to mention part of the retirement application, you do also indicate the amount of federal taxes that you will have withheld. So it's a separate page within the application that the members indicate how much federal tax you want withheld from your retirement check. This amount can be changed at any point throughout retirement. If you go on our website, mass.gov/MTRS, under forms for retirees, and it's the W4P form where you would fill out that new application and send it into our Charlestown office for us to get that updated for you. Now, before I get into the Social Security, I do just want to say that we are not Social Security. We're here to make you aware of this as a Massachusetts state pension holder. There are two provisions in place that may affect your that may impact your ability to collect your Social Security benefit once you retire. The first one is the windfall elimination provision. This provision affects your ability to collect your own Social Security benefit. You'd be exempt from this provision if you are eligible to retire prior to 1/1/86 or if you have 30 years of substantial earnings. If you're not exempt from this provision, then your Social Security benefit may be reduced by up to 55%. The second provision is the government pension offset provision. This affects your ability to collect your spouse's Social Security benefit. You'd be exempt from this provision if you are eligible to retire prior to 12/1/82 or if you have 30 years of substantial earnings. This does not affect your spouse's ability to collect their Social Security benefit. If you're not exempt from this provision, the likelihood that you will receive any of your spouse's Social Security benefit is very small, if at all. Both of these provisions will not affect your ability to receive your any Medicare coverage. If you go on Social Security's website, ssa.gov, if you have some additional questions as far as how these provisions apply to you, then you can take a look at their website. There's a lot of very helpful information on there, and you could also set up an appointment to speak with a Social Security representative about your specific situation to see what type of reduction that you might see in your Social Security benefit payout. One thing I do want to just stress and provide you the reassurance of is that your MTRS benefit is what it is, regardless of what happens with Social Security. Your benefit will always remain to be calculated under that set formula that we discussed earlier, and it will continue to be paid out in that amount for the rest of your life, and it will never go down. It may only go up from there. Okay, so let's end on a high note. It's not too high, but it's still better than Social Security. So you are going to be eligible to receive a cost of living adjustment. Essentially, after one full year of being retired, you are then eligible to receive this cost of living adjustment, or COLA. This does have to be granted by legislature, but typically it does get approved each year. I've been here 10 years and it's been approved at least those last 10 years. And what this cost of living adjustment is it's 3% or the consumer price index, whichever amount is less, on the first $13,000 of your retirement allowance. This is a maximum increase of your benefit of $390 a year in the first year, $780 the next year, and so on. So it is compounding. Unfortunately, it doesn't keep up with inflation, but it's still something. So that is all that we have for you today. I don't know if we have any additional questions, and then we will move on.
Yep, we do have a few questions in the chat. First one is, how soon should I begin the paperwork in order to plan for a date of retirement?
So in the back of the booklet, you will see there is a retirement checklist, which is a very helpful tool if you're pretty far out from your retirement. Typically, that timeline does start about a year when you're a year out from your retirement. So essentially, a year out from your retirement is when you would want to start touching base on your health insurance, like I said. As far as the MTRS goes, as long as we receive your retirement application 3 to 4 months before your date of retirement, we will consider you an on-time retiree, meaning that we will then be able to pay you out your retirement check on time at the end of that first month that you've been retired. If in regards to your school district, every school district may be a little bit different as far as when you might have to let them know that you're retiring, but specifically for the MTRS, you would want to start looking at the application, I would say 6 months before your date of retirement, and then you can get it into us 3 to 4 months before to be considered on time.
We go back a little to purchasable service.
Yes, purchasable
Okay.
service.
So a couple of questions that are very similar. First is, can a community college in another state count for purchasable service? And the other one is being an adjunct professor at a private university pensionable?
Okay, so I will start with the private university since it's right offhand. Private university would not be eligible. It has to be within a public entity for, or a public school university for a purchase under, and that would be under the other Massachusetts public service application. If you had out-of-state service, then that also has to be public teaching service. Whether it be a public university or a public day school, it does have to be a public teaching service. Can you repeat the first question? I don't know if I answered.
Sure. Can a community college in another state count for purchasable service?
Oh, yes. Okay, so I did answer it. So as long as that community college is a public entity, then yes, you would be eligible. So the only type of out-of-state service that you are allowed to buy back is public teaching service.
Okay, just looking through here, a couple more.
Sure.
If eligible, how is the buyback cost calculated by the MTRS, and what are the payment options?
Okay, so the buyback costs, so the interest rate that's applied to the buyback are directly assigned to the different purchases as Jen walked through. The buyback cost is a little bit different for each different type of purchase. However, typically the cost will be calculated by looking at your earnings. So we look at what you were earning at the time that you rendered the service. We say, what would you have paid in? What would you have contributed to the MTRS had that service had been with us at that time? And that gives us a certain amount of earnings or a certain dollar figure. And then what we do with that principal amount is we apply the compounding interest at either the 7% or the 3.5% annually until the service purchase is paid in full. In regards to the buyback of the purchase, if you would be given two different options when you receive a invoice for that time. The first option would be a lump sum payment. As long as the lump sum payment is paid in full by the due dates indicated, that's the amount that we would receive. Or you can opt on the 5-year installment plan. The 5-year installment plan would be obviously spread out over 5 years, and that interest does continue to accrue over that 5-year period, but it would be 5 equal installments paid throughout those 5 years.
If you choose option A, but pass away a year later and there is money in your account, what happens to those funds?
Essentially, if you pass away under option A and there's still money left in your annuity savings account, those funds would then be rolled into the pension fund. Since there's no other than that mid-month benefit that would be paid out, or the mid-month payment that would be paid out to your survivor, there would be no one additional to pay out that benefit, to pay out whatever is left in your annuity savings account. So that's kind of the, not a gamble, but that's kind of what you get when you choose option A. You are choosing to receive the maximum amount as a retiree, as an active retiree, thereby foregoing your any future benefit that would be paid out to a beneficiary.
Okay, a couple more.
Sure.
Can you opt to retire on your birthday in October, or do you need special permission from your district to do so?
So I will tell you, as far as your district's knowledge, we don't have knowledge to say what each specific district would do. Every school district might be different as far as when you need to tell them that you're retiring and how far in advance you need to tell them. But in regards to the calculation of your benefit, somebody retiring on their birthday is actually something that we see quite common. And the reason for that is because your age is a direct impact on the benefit calculation. So the older you are, the higher your percentages that you'll receive of your salary average. So essentially by using your birthday, if you are going to use your birthday, you would want to use your specific birthday as your date of retirement, because specifically on your date of birth, we have the ability to use the age factor at that higher age for your birthday.
As a teacher, I worked on a policy over the summer with the superintendent. I was paid an hourly rate. Does that count for service hours?
So I would like to say that we can't provide necessarily specific individual guidance as far as what is eligible or not. However, hourly pay is typically not eligible. It does depend on, I would say it does depend, but typically your hourly pay is not going to be eligible as far as your MTRS contributions, and you shouldn't be paid retirement contribution. You shouldn't be paying retirement contributions on that hourly summer service, because it falls outside of the school year and it is paid on an hourly basis.
Great. And the last question, does the MTRS offer one-on-one appointments with members for individual review of circumstances?
So at this time, we don't offer one-on-one appointments. We do have walk-in appointments available, but they're strictly still limited to being able to drop off service purchase applications or things like that. We do have we have a call center who can help you through certain general topics, and we do have general emails that you can send it to. But as far as individual sit-down appointments, we don't have that yet. However, something that we did just start to roll out is virtual retirement counseling. It's something that is relatively new. We had, prior to the pandemic, done group counseling events where members would come into our office and we would provide you with a creditable service estimate, give you a presentation similar to the one that you saw today, and then you'd be able to sit one-on-one down with a counselor. So what we're doing virtually is very similar to that. However, you don't even have to leave the comforts of your own home. You can join us right through Teams, and you shouldn't have to download any type of application. It's just a Teams event that we would be holding for you, and we would do the presentation. We would calculate your years of service prior to that and mail it out to you. And then afterwards, we have the ability to go into individual breakout rooms and give you some individual counseling. So that right now is the closest thing that we can get to sitting down with you and going over individual situations. But we're really excited about it, and we just had our first couple of trial runs, and they will be offered every other Wednesday starting at 3:30, and you can find the link to sign up for them on our website. There are certain requirements for this, so we are gearing it towards teachers who are in the retirement process or very close to retiring. So if that is you and if you meet those requirements, then we would love to have you attend one of those virtual retirement counseling sessions. But if you are not meeting the guidelines per se for that, then you can always call our office and we can try to assist you like that. Long-winded question of yes.
One more?
Sure.
Okay. Several of my years at a previous Massachusetts school district shows up on my MTRS page as 0.96 years, and others show up as 1. I worked full years for each year at this district, which I left in 2017. How do I get this updated to reflect full years?
So the likelihood of why you're seeing 0.96 if you worked a full year is solely due to some data behind the scenes. It's not saying that the MTRS is not crediting you that full year. There's certain different types of data that kind of gets filtered in through the system to be able to auto calculate your service credit for that time period. And it's likely just because of that pay data information that's why it's a little bit less than a year. So don't panic if you see 0.96. It generally is the reason for it. You can either, if you know that it's wrong and you want to get it corrected, you can request a creditable service estimate. But also I will tell you that if you know that you worked the full year and it's 0.96, as Jen indicated, it's likely that if you don't have any short time in that year, you're still going to get a full year of service credit for that time period. So if you're concerned about it, you can give us a call and we can confirm that for you, or you can send in a request for a creditable service estimate to get that solidified for you and corrected. All right, and with that, I think we are all done today. Thank you all for attending the seminar with us. We hope you enjoy the rest of your spring break, and thank you for some great questions, and have a lovely afternoon.